My guest today is a composer and record producer whose music has been heard by millions of people all over the world. His music currently has an average of 800,000 monthly listeners on digital streaming platforms. He is a 13-time winner of the prestigious BMI Film and Television Award, with more than 5,000 compositions registered with BMI. He has sold more than 7 million CDs, and his album WWE The Music Volume 5 displaced The Beatles to take the #2 slot on the Billboard
And
album
I feel
chart.
bad about that.
From 1985 to 2017, he was the musical director and composer for WWE. He composed and produced the iconic themes for stars such as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, The Undertaker, and many more. He has composed scores for multiple film projects, 6 of which were recorded with full orchestra at Abbey Road and Air Studios in London. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome the legendary Jim Johnston to the program. Welcome, Jim.
Wow. Thank you very much. That was too good. It's one of those things where, who's he talking about?
Did I really do all that? Well, I mean, you know, as I said,
I think I signed in on the wrong day.
No. I mean, you know, you're
I'm thrilled to be here with you.
Thank you, Jim.
I probably have more questions for you than you have questions for me. So,
well, I mean, happy to, you know, let's I'll start and then let's see where we end up. So the first thing I want to ask is how did you learn to compose?
Very self-taught. Listen to records and I'd slow them down. This is back when, you know, you had a turntable, slow them down, trying to figure out what people were playing. And I had a guitar chord book. And then later did the same thing with piano and just worked my way through different instruments, largely as I sort of needed them. I think I'd like a flute part on this. So learn to play the flute just well enough to stumble through that part. And of course, you get momentum because the more instruments you learn to play, the more there are indeed similarities from instrument to instrument. And so it becomes a little bit easier. And in elementary school, I played trumpet in school band, but so that's the extent of my anything that would come into the category of formal training, which is why, as I told you before we were recording here today, that I'm thrilled to be speaking with you because relative to me, you're so educationally accomplished, and there are so many things down that road that I feel maybe too harsh to say I missed, but I would have really enjoyed knowing. And who knows if it would have made me a better composer. Maybe I'm also open to maybe it would make me worse, because I've certainly been in situations, particularly in orchestral recordings, where people are so trained to look at the page that they will play what I would think 90% of people would think is a horrible note, but they are so disciplined that their brains just say, like, well, I guess this guy wants a really awful sounding dissonant thing because it's B flat on the page, so that's what I'm going to play. I'm a big believer in music is all about feeling and listening, and if it doesn't make you feel something, it's not a successful piece of music.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like you kind of come from a sort of a popular music background, in the sense that you sort of learned guitar and listening to records and things, and Tom,
by necessity there, Tom, because to dive in and I'm going to teach myself classical music, I mean, that's a tough road. So pop music is G, C, D on the guitar. That's, you got a shot at least.
Sure, absolutely. But I mean, I think, and some of your music is, clearly kind of guitar based, pentatonic driven things like the DX theme, for example. And then you get things like Undertaker, which is more of a sort of piano based piece that really has some sort of colorful harmonies and things. I wanted to ask you about the piano specifically. A lot of places that I teach are sort of reducing classes in keyboard skills because, the idea is that, well, people use the DAW and so forth. As a self-taught pianist, I mean, how important is playing the keyboard to your work? And would you think that your work would be a lot harder if you didn't play the keyboard?
Much harder, because even a lot of the more really hard rock things I've written were written on piano. Piano is really helpful compositionally because, at least you can hear more.
Mm.
When you play guitar, you hear the guitar. It's the guitar part. The piano represents more of the composition. So as I'm playing piano, if it's a rock piece, I can play bass guitar and a little bit of the lead motif and the rhythm guitar. If it's an orchestral piece, I can hear the different instruments playing, or imagine what I would like to be playing there. On guitar, I can do that much less, and certainly less well.
Yeah, so there's almost a sort of neutrality to the piano, right? That it can sort of become other things
Yeah.
later, in other words. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what do you want me to be today? Or what are we doing? Send me in, coach.
Yeah.
Are we doing orchestral today, or are we doing guitar, bass? Yeah, you're exactly right. It's very amenable to what you need it to do.
Yeah, and presumably that's why, you think of things like those moments of John Williams playing Steven Spielberg the music for E.T. on the piano,
Yeah.
right, and saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
it'll be a flute later, but right now it's
Yeah.
this, and yeah,
But
interesting."
it's also interesting, such an accomplished orchestral guy as John, sort of doing the same hemming and hawing with Steven Spielberg of it'll be a big orchestral thing. It'll be like, big, a lot of brass and stuff. It's just piano now. It's like, John, your reputation precedes you. I get it.
Right, like I trust you on this one, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Is
But
that
it's
yeah?
spectacular to hear those themes that in fact did become these gigantic, 200-piece orchestral things. I love the simplicity of just hearing how he heard it to begin with. And a lot of times it's much easier to really hear the fundamental emotion behind the piece. That's why I love, even when they have horrible voices, I love hearing composers sing their own material. Like, Brian Wilson, Burt Bacharach are stunning examples of horrible singers, but, stunning composers.
Yeah, it makes me think of Cole Porter as well. He sang some of his own material
Yeah.
too, and yeah. So with that,
Hey, got it, Cole. Okay, that's good. Love it.
where's Frank? Yeah. And what's interesting actually now is that I find from just reading through YouTube comments and things like that actually a lot of fans, myself included, really love hearing now the original version of, not only the ET music, but like your Undertaker music, the original piano version gets a lot of attention. Is that how you originally presented it to the producers, or did you sort of mock it up with the organ and things like that?
I um, I think I probably did a mock-up with at least an organ. There were a lot of times that I was concerned about the sort of the decision makers within WWE. Of course, there were very few. It was Vince and maybe two other people expressed opinions of value. That they would, well, I knew because occasionally I would present something really raw or just a guitar part and say, but like the John Williams thing, it'll be a big band, really powerful, a lot of drums and, a lot of energy. And they wouldn't get it. And then I'd do a mock-up and they'd completely get it. But also they would say, oh, well, that's completely different than what you played the first time. It's like, no, it's exactly what I played the first time.
It's interesting.
Note for note.
It's absolutely, yeah, because you're going, well, actually, it's the same music. It's just, I've just added more things. And
I think I did that with DX. I think sorry, I'll show you.
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
I think they had stopped by and I was playing acoustic guitar and I said, I have an idea, and it's also a side note. That's always been attributed to, oh, well, Jim was inspired by Rage Against the Machine and bands like that.
Right.
And it's like, no, Jim wasn't inspired by that. Jim was inspired by funk, which was what Jim was largely inspired by, because I consider it just a funk song. Like if I had had a black singer do it, it would have been like, oh, it's a funk song. But with Chris Warren doing it, that's what took it over into the Rage Against the Machine, the shouting vocal thing. But I tried to sell it. It's like, I mean, of course, it's going to be a big band, saying that, just this simple saying, and they're like deer in the headlights. It's like, well, where does it go? Like, what happens? Does it go into a big chorus and everyone singing, or, and that was a little bit of a constant problem, but I would assume that most composers have that problem, that you may really believe in what you're presenting, but it's the old conundrum of how it's perceived by whoever you're playing it to, and what's the goal. What would you like that person to come out of this conversation with? And I get it. You got to meet them on their terms if you're the one who's in the position of trying to sell them on something like that. Like, this is a good idea. If you can't get it into their heads so that they kind of hear what you're hearing, then it doesn't matter how good the idea is, it won't be successful.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a conundrum I face quite often. And of course, with your kind of mock-up versions, I suppose a lot of those things were then developed into the final track. Often,
absolutely.
I mean, how often did you get to work with live players? I mean, other than maybe some of the bands and things you collaborated with, or were you mostly having to kind of, like, things like the drums? I always think, the drums sound great now, and I sort of think, how did he do that? Were you sequencing the drums and things like DX? And
sometimes I played live. Sometimes it was completely done in software. But I never had the time, Tom, to do the traditional route. Just the time it took to find a good drummer, see if they could come in. It's like, boom, I'm already behind. It's like, well, it needed to go out last night. So there were a lot of times that I was given the news of needing a theme, and they need the theme today, that day.
Wow.
So you'd have to, now I'd have time to make it better for the next coming weeks, maybe, but I'd have to have something that was at least broadcast worthy, that day.
Wow.
So like the whole notion of, well, you know, on Tuesday we'll get a good drum sound, and Wednesday we'll set up guitars, and Thursday, you know, we'll start recording. It's like, no, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, I mean the one wrestling theme that I was lucky enough to do for Ring of Honor was very much that way. It was like I met them the week before at a show, and then some of the guys formed a faction, and then it was like, hey, we need this next Friday, and it was like Wednesday or something, and it was one of those like totally last minute things. And of course, I mean, the one thing that I quite liked about that I also liked about doing TV is that there's a sort of an urgency to that where it doesn't get kind of uh chopped and changed a lot, right? It's like it has to be, so it just sort of it kind of coalesces and then it goes out.
Yeah. And also, even within yourself, there's no time to uh, stumble through, well, I'm just not feeling it today. It's like, yeah, you are. You're feeling it not only today, you're feeling it right now.
Yeah.
So that has actually been an interesting thing that has happened post WWE to me is uh, I suffer pretty extremely from project completion complex, where I can go forever tweaking things because now I have time.
Ah.
And but it's a problem because I really would like to finish things and move on to the next thing, um, but often I don't, and it keeps me from putting out a lot more music ideas that I come up with now. And it's actually just recently something I've really been addressing and trying to, I'm not quite ready to find a, completion expert and, uh, go into therapy for it. But I have been reading, tips for how do you break out of it. And ultimately, I think it comes down to you have to say, okay, uh, this is an idea I had. Uh, I recorded it, and it's pretty close to what I envisioned, and I've got to let it go. Because because I've also had so many times like that where I keep working on it and it doesn't get better, it gets worse.
Yeah.
You kind of work it into the ground. And there is some little bit of magic to that original seed of creativity and just going with your initial gut on it and putting it out. So that never was a problem when I was with WWE because their forced schedule on me, uh, there was never time to, let things hover for a long time.
Yeah.
Yo, I'm still working on that. No, no, you're not.
Well, that leads quite nicely actually to a question. I mean, we can jump between the films and the
Oh,
WWE
jump all over.
entrance work. I heard you say in an interview that when you composed the score for Legendary, starring John Cena, that you were hired to sort of take over from the score because something wasn't working, which is a position I have been in also. I heard you say that you were given a week and a half. I wonder if if that was maybe a slight exaggeration. I don't know, but what was the process like on Legendary? Was it really a week and a half, or was it? But certainly it was quick, right?
Vince is a pretty impetuous guy, and so the Hollywood guys he had hired to do these films went about it the typical Hollywood way, and I guess the director had chosen someone he'd used before, and Vince heard the early pieces and just thought it was. I'd never heard them, incidentally, so I don't know what happened because I had a gun to my head on some other thing at that moment. So, uh, and apparently he didn't like it, and he would just. It would be a very simple process. He would say, "I don't like this. Call Jim, tell him to do it." And so yeah, there was an incredibly short time to do it. So I was, wow, I learned a lot very, very quickly. But I had a great music editor, Chris Brooks, who'd been very involved in a lot of big films in Hollywood, and was very fortunate to get him. He helped me so much through the steps necessary, because there were a lot of steps I didn't really fully understand. I'd done some small films, but small films where the people making the film are sort of learning as well. So no one knew exactly what the process was. But yeah, it was, but it was great. It was wonderful. The whole film thing with the WWE films was, and I'm sure this is something that many composers, maybe most composers must run into, because when you think about the history of film, like I always used to think about it back in the day where you'd go down to the video store and a huge store filled with films, videos, and you're walking the aisles and you realize I have never heard of 95% of these films. Mm-hmm. And probably because 85% of them are horrible. They're just people who made a film. And God bless them for trying, because it's a hard thing to do, to make even a bad film. But as a composer, you're a little bit trapped between wanting to do the best music you can, to selfishly put your best foot forward. But I found you can quickly write music that is too good for the movie, because it's speaking to emotions that are not in the movie. You're writing a beautiful love theme, but unfortunately, the acting in the movie, you're not feeling a big love thing. So the music becomes almost crushing, or certainly at very best taking you out of the storyline. So and to have to throttle back was an interesting experience. Okay, that's too much, because you're the score, you're subservient to the film, not the other way around. And it's interesting too, because there are many circumstances amongst all those films where, I guess in a subtle fashion, I will say, you're asked, like, wow, we could really use some help in this scene, where give me something that's going to make this scene make sense. So it goes in both directions. And I think the composer often gets a little bit trapped in the center, where there's almost not a winning hand. But I find the concept just intriguing, that, oh, that's too good. As a matter of fact, I remember playing the final cue in Legendary. Vince dropped by the studio and said, "What do you got?" And I played him the main theme. He really liked that. And then, being a wrestling guy, he said, "What do you got for the go home?" Or, the final scene.
Finish, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How are we getting out of this? And I said, it's really rough. It's just on a synth right now. He said, yeah, play it. And so, sorry, Vince, I'm going to give you a backroom thing. Vince is a really emotional guy. He's like weeping, particularly because there's this line about dads here. These two brothers, their dad has died, but it's obviously a meaningful thing for both of them in the film. And for Vince, his relationship with his dad was both complicated but very important. And so that got to the end of the scene, I stopped the playback, and he just was thinking for a little bit, and then said, problem is the music's too good. And I thought, like, well, that's really good news. But then I quickly realized, no, that's bad news, really bad news. And I said, there's one really good magical thing about filmmaking. It's the mix. And if the music is too strong, it's amazing what just turning down the volume a little bit will do. And he seemed to quickly grasp that idea. And but yeah, it's kind of sad but true. As you turn down the volume and you get less, it's like an emotion pot now. I want a lot of emotion. No, let's back off on the emotion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so often, I mean, when I was working on TV shows and stuff in Hollywood, I ended up not being able to watch the broadcast because the music was so quiet so often, and it would just,
yeah, I worked so hard, and that's what you did.
Just kind of hearing the cymbals, like, oh man.
Do you know how long I worked on that cue?
Yeah. And how great it sounded when it was loud, but the dialogue.
You should hear that thing without the film. It's great.
And yeah, the ending cue of Legendary I thought was fantastic, and I sort of wondered if you had started with that cue and worked backwards. And the other question I had about that cue is, there's this great bit where John Cena comes into the gym sort of to save the day, as it were, and you have this kind of celeste glockenspiel kind of moment that was just such a sort of, I'm not quite sure where that kind of musical and filmic idea comes from, but it's like a sports movie ending idea, but it just works so great, and it sort of quietens right down, and here's this sort of celeste, and and here comes Cena, and I thought that was so great. So did you start with that cue and then move backwards?
No, I'm sort of a find a main theme guy, and then everything else somewhat revolves around that. But I can give you an answer to that. I thought there were numerous times, or this is the storyline I created for myself, basically, is John Cena is kind of the reluctant Jesus character.
Interesting.
And there are two times when I thought the appropriate music was like when he's walking into the gym, the practice gym earlier in the film, and then in the last scene when they're walking into the championship, into that gym. That for him, that's church.
Right, which is one of the lines, right?
He's walking into church. And so I thought, okay, something that kind of hints. I mean, in the earlier thing, it was an organ cue when he first walks in. So it was literal. And in the final scene, it was suggestive. But I think Legendary wasn't a spectacular film, but it wasn't a bad film.
I really enjoyed it.
It's a nice story. It's a little sappy, and I think it was a breakout time for John, who had some basic skills but didn't fully get the program yet. So it was like a really advanced wrestling promo for him. And also, another thing that I still don't fully understand is where is that break point between films that clearly feel like TV films versus films? And I still wonder, is it the acting or is it the story? One thing I know is a big contributor that just drives me out of my mind is, and these films were all by fundamentally TV directors, is TV directors overlight.
Interesting.
And films want to be on the dark side. Even big outdoor, beautiful horse whisperer, the colors need to be deep, and it's not. And TV people come at things like everything needs to be lit. There are no shadows, like behind you. All the instruments, they need their own light, so that, I don't want to just see instruments back there. I want to know exactly what instruments they are, and I want to see them clearly. And you have to make room, I believe, for people's imagination, and because that's the real winning hand, is get people to tell the story for you in their heads.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. And I think actually one thing about your music that I noticed in sort of in the wrestling world that sort of speaks to what you're saying is this idea of quiet.
Yeah.
I think that I went
Don't need to hit them with a hammer all the time.
Yeah, like I went to see when I went to the Ring of Honor show to meet the office there. I saw the Briscoes wrestle, and they had this really kind of quiet, spooky guitar piece, and it was actually the first wrestling show I'd ever been to, and I just remember thinking, this is so atmospheric, and these guys were so scary, and it was really brilliant. And I reflected on that, and I thought some of your great music for wrestling entrances was so quiet and introspective. Do you feel that that's part of the thing that may be missing these days, is that things tend to be, as a rule, louder and more kind of, like you said, hammering?
I think everything is missing today. Starting with, it just feels like a piece of music that coincidentally plays when someone is walking out. There's no connection between that person's storyline or character. It's just music that happens to be playing. And then you get into the music that's playing, and it's like loud sound effects to a beat. There's never a motif or a melody. It doesn't feel like scoring at all. And I'm sorry to be so critical about it. I'm sure there are guys working hard to produce it, but I think it's really pretty bad. I don't watch much, but anytime I just am thumbing through channels and come upon it, I'll listen a little bit, and it's, one thing that I think worked well. Sorry, it's hard to say things like this without my feeling like I'm blowing smoke, and that's not my intention. But when I was doing it, it was very important to me to have something that got you into the mood of that person and their storyline as quickly as possible. I felt like that was kind of my duty. And I also felt like I wanted to help these guys succeed. This is their dream. And if I can throw in 2 cents to helping someone achieve their dream, that's okay by me. So you've got to tell their story for them, and you've got to give them something that gets them into their story. When they are still behind the curtain and their music starts, you can tell when someone comes out and they're in character. They're ready to go. They're ready. I mean, what gets lost, I guess, in pro wrestling is, yes, there's this athletic element, but all the successful people were okay wrestlers, not particularly acrobatic, weren't doing, maybe except for Shawn Michaels, weren't doing crazy acrobatic stuff. They're actors, and they sold their characters. And that's the powerful thing. That's what makes stars. And that's why I believe there aren't big stars now. It's a very generic, homogenous wrestlers. And I think, certainly storyline is an important contributor, but it's very interesting how storylines tend to get better when the characters are stronger. So it's easier to put them into situations. But I think the music is just such a critical part of that world, and maybe no more critical than in film, but because in film, it's leading your emotion. Because it's the classic example, you can take two beautiful star people, they're about to kiss, they're falling in love. But with the music, you can sell that as they're finally together, after all this heartache, they're going to be together happily ever after. You can also portend that there's someone sneaking up behind the girl with a knife and about to kill her. Visually, you will not see that, but the music can do that. And I think the great directors realize that, and they use the score as a character, almost as maybe a narrator.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well what you're saying about the current stuff, because the people that I enjoy watching now, actually, if I really think about it, some of those people actually have some of the best music. Like I think Cody Rhodes, I really, really enjoy. And one of the things he actually said was, my biggest question coming back was, can I use my music? Which I thought was so interesting. So I think there is maybe some correlation there, right, between people who have sort of really intriguing music. I think it really helps the story. So you were talking about light and shadow in film, and another thing that made me think of was your approach to harmony and modulation in some of your music. Particularly, I thought in the music for Goldust, which contains a lot of really interesting modulation.
No one knows what keys that's in.
Well, I had to listen to. There's lots of versions,
including me.
I had to listen to some of the versions of one. I found sort of, you just introduction in E minor, and then actually the material comes in C sharp minor, which was such a great kind of shift. And I noticed also in your PCO theme that you did for Ring of Honor, that you sort of started off. I've now got it written down. I think it was that you started off in C sharp minor and went to A minor. What was your sort of thinking there in terms of? I'm guessing it was to do with light and shadow and kind of character. And how did you kind of come up with some of those things?
You're very kind to throw out that I thought that deeply about these things. This is where it gets into, like, you're educated in music. I'm really not educated in music and theory and stuff. It's completely feel. It just felt good to go there. And sometimes it's happy accidents. I'm just playing piano and boom, and it's like, oh, well, that sounds kind of interesting. Yeah, the whole thing of thinking academically about music is 100% not part of my process. It is completely, wow, I'm really liking this. Oh, it'd be interesting. I think the bottom should just fall out of it right now. and just go down to almost nothing, to, you know, a tambourine and an acoustic guitar, you know, for 4 bars, 8 bars maybe. And then boom, you know, slap them in the face. Here we go. Come back, but let's come back in a different key. You know, I have literally never gone into a composition with a plan, really. You know, say like, you know, I'm feeling like maybe this starts in a minor kind of thing, but then it becomes, you know, major and then more minor, and I wish I could do that, but even if I wanted to do it, I wouldn't know how to do it. I mean, it's really extreme. Like, you'd be sadly amazed or disappointed, maybe, you know, like a diminished chord. Okay. I can't explain to you what a diminished chord is. I don't know what a diminished chord is. I might play one all the time, but I don't know what it is. I don't, you know, and I'm sure you can tell me right now, is like diminish it. Does that mean flatting the 5 or something? Or, uh,
Yeah, it's
you know, I mean, a few
third.
I know. I mean, minor, major, major sevenths. I can tell you why, you know, a seventh. I know why they're a seventh, but boy. And I don't, while I read music in that I can look on the score and say that's an A flat, you can't give me a piece of piano music and have me play it. So
Yeah, I mean, but what's so interesting is that, you know, that these sort of quite advanced techniques are there, you know, right? It's almost like, you know, you arrive at these things through feel, but actually, like, a lot of composers, you know, if they don't know that there's a possibility of doing that modulation, just don't, right? So what's interesting about your music is that you know, these things are actually present, and I wondered if, and you were saying you're very influenced just by the feel of it, but so much of what I hear nowadays is, well, I'm in 4/4 and I'm in this key and I'm going to stay there because that's what I sort of, you know how to do, if you like. But were you then therefore kind of influenced by certain types of music, just in terms of listening, like how something like the Goldust theme, for example? I mean, how did you sort of know to make those shifts, if you like?
I think it really is the same answer. I just get as much information as I can about the character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ideally, seen something that they've done, you know, how they walk in,
Mm.
um, any input I can get. You know, hearing them speak, how do they speak?
Right.
Um, and I don't have a checklist, but it's the same kind of thing. It's just a very raw, feel, intuitive kind of, oh, he talks a little bit slowly. All right, so maybe he's cerebral and he's thinking about stuff. Maybe he's dumb. You know, I'm just going through the simple, what I see, what I feel. How they move is a very big one because that will dictate tempo.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has an internal tempo. Most don't know they do, but they do. And you see when they move. I thought the most interesting thing is if I was, if my initial idea for someone was a little too fast and I'd see it play the first time in the ring, I could just feel like I'm pushing the guy. I'm pushing the guy to walk faster than he wants to walk. You know, it's important that, like, think about the obvious example, uh, Steve Austin.
Yeah.
He comes in, it's like he's dancing to that music.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he walks down, 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 down. You know, it's right in step. And The Rock comes in and he walks in like perfect quarter time to his. He floats at a slower multiple of it, but it's right with it, you know, and even his eyes and stuff, they like punctuate beats.
Yeah, the
You know,
looks.
he'll turn right on beats, and you know, and I'm convinced he doesn't know he's doing that, but it's it's his theme, it's his world, he's in it. And when he's in it, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And that's what I don't ever see these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You mentioned some of my favorite things. I mean, I think Steve Austin's theme is my favorite of yours. And my favorite wrestler, I think, is Shawn Michaels. And so I wanted to ask you. Obviously, those two wrestlers make me think of WrestleMania 14. And I wanted to ask you. Obviously, that day has a lot of mythology around it and so forth, and a classic match and so on. But you performed at WrestleMania 14 in the band, playing the DX theme. Can you tell us a little bit about that day? What was that like, doing that?
Terrifying. I'm a complete stage fright guy, non-performer. And so to play and to play in front of that many people, you know, what saved me, I think, is that many people, because I found once I walked out, you are so insignificant, you know, compared to these thousands of people. It's like they're utterly removed, as opposed to the terror of playing for 15 people, you know, and all 15, you really get a sense they're listening to you and they're coming up with opinions. And that's when your imagination takes off of like, oh my God, they think I'm horrible. You know, they hate this song. This is horrible. This is not working out. I should run from the room right now. So I don't know. It's a it was an interesting. I'm glad I got through it, but I can't say that I came out of it thinking like, wow, I'm going to suggest that we do this a lot more often.
Yeah,
No, I mean, it was great because Chris Warren really was the star of the show. So I could just kind of fade into the woodwork behind him. And then I remember, didn't Hunter come out and put Chris on his shoulders or something?
Hunter was he definitely came out. I didn't see the shot of him with Chris on his shoulders, but he may well have done.
I did. At some point, it was either there. We played at the Garden one time too, and I've forgotten. I'm sorry, Madison Square Garden in New York City, and it was very impressive. Hunter came over and literally just grabbed Chris Warren, not a giant guy, but a full-grown adult, and just lifted him onto his shoulders. It's like, I thought, that's a little scary.
And you were glad it wasn't you, presumably.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, I watched three films in the end. I watched The Chaperone as well, which I really, really enjoyed. And what a great cast you had: Ariel Winter from Modern Family and Yardley Smith, the voice of Lisa Simpson, and of course Triple H.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So yeah, if you look at it again, you'll when you hear, it's so
like, oh yeah.
That's because it's really interesting because it's just her normal voice, I guess it turns out, which is kind of funny. So and also Triple H is in that film, as we talked about. I really just wanted to ask you, obviously with the Reunion and Legendary and Chaperone are very different films. What was your approach to the comedic music in The Chaperone? Because I heard there's a scene when Triple H is in the vegan restaurant and you sort of did a Thomas Newman type sort of thing with tabla and things like that, which only seemed to really be in that cue. I guess because I thought the joke was to do with the kind of vegan restaurant thing. But yeah, what was your approach to the comedy in that film?
I'm I would say that I've never been a fan of comedic music. That I think it's the one thing where music can't be funny without being stupid and childish. Um, so it's almost like you're going to help the comedy most by being the straight man,
Hmm.
by playing like there's nothing there's nothing funny about this. No, this is not a joke. And let the audience decide it's funny. Or that maybe it helps the absurdity of it if the music just doesn't break character with the film. It's almost like you're part of an inside joke now. So no, I just don't like funny music. I think that's why I never really go there. Like with a tuba doing do 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 do. It's just I think it immediately takes people out of any scenario.
And I noticed that actually with Chaperone that you kind of played it straight rather than playing it kind of funny all the time. And I think that in the end you end up with a film that's sort of quite heartwarming and fun rather than being sort of silly or something, which I think is what you're sort of saying.
Yeah, yeah. I and maybe that's wrong of me because it's kind of putting my personal taste into something. But I don't know. It was a very interesting. All the films were a very interesting scenario, typically unique to a WWE project, in that they they were not the typical Hollywood rules because Vince just is not going down that road. And I had very specific directions to write music for these films. Whereas the Hollywood mode would be, here's the director of the film, uh, meet with the guy as much as he wants to meet and give him what he wants. Not my deal. And in many ways, I felt like it was so somewhat unfair to the directors, and I felt bad about it. And but just like them, I was hired to do a job, and so I was doing the job I was hired to do. And I must say, I think in many cases, um, I knew what I was doing was different than what they would have preferred. Um, but I think a lot of times I was right.
Oh, absolutely. I thought that everything worked great. And I was watching them and just thinking like, yeah, well, because I've always admired your music and your sensitivity to drama and stuff, and I was watching these films thinking like, yeah, I mean, these are great and these are Jim's scores, and I could see the translation from what you did in your sort of wrestling music into film music. So with that in mind. At this stage in your career, what is your kind of dream scenario in terms of future projects? Are you hoping to do more films? I mean, I personally would love to see that, or television, or kind of, are you hoping to do more wrestling music? I mean, what would be your kind of ultimate dream project at this stage?
Well, it's interesting timing because I feel like after so many years of being in the intensity of the WWE world, that I've gone through this long cleansing period of not being under that kind of pressure and being able to just pursue things because just as a complete personal exercise, like I like this idea and this is what I'm going to do, and I'll work on it as long as I want to work on it. So now I'm sort of coming out the other side of that and feeling like I want to do something. I want to do something else. Going back into the wrestling world, probably no. I mean, I still come up with theme ideas all the time, and I think pretty soon I'm going to release on my website a package of like 5 themes and see what happens. Because as I've said, I think the music in WWE, AEW, Ring of Honor, it just largely is completely missing the boat. It's a complete mystery to me. I understand WWE. There's, I understand Hunter not calling and saying like, hey, would you like to help us out on this theme? This guy, or because there was still a mystery to me, but there was bad blood not bad blood. I think he always felt like I was Vince's guy, and then he was coming into his own of running the show or wanting to run the show. And he wanted his own guys, which I understand. That makes sense. Unless your own guys aren't delivering, in which case maybe you should get different guys. So, and I've been approached by some wrestlers along the way, would you write me a theme? But then you get into things like, I don't like sneaking stuff. You get into things like, if I did something and if the guy loved it and wanted to use it, when he walks into the office and tells Hunter or whoever, is in charge of talent that he's working with, I have this theme I want to use. So it's like, okay, great. That sounds good. By the way, where'd you get the theme? Oh, Jim Johnston wrote it. Maybe that gets him in trouble. It's like, what the hell are you doing going behind the company's back and asking Jim Johnston to write you a theme? So I thought, okay, I guess we could just come up with an alias, but, eventually that will be uncovered and, that will work out. So I'd rather it be above board, and I'd be happy to write some themes, but, I don't want it to be a mystery. As a matter of fact, I don't understand why it wouldn't be good news. Like, Joe is coming out this week to a new theme, and, it's the first new theme written by Jim Johnston in 7 years or 8 years, whatever it's been.
Well,
and other than that, sorry to finish your question, is I'd love to write music for some good kind of boutique drama independent films, because I think that's where a lot of really interesting work is being done these days. I don't know, the really big Hollywood films, first of all, it's a very small club that's very hard, if not impossible, to break into. And the scores end up being, while wonderful and incredibly well done, they're ultimately very formulaic, because so many of the films have become so formulaic. And maybe wonderful within the formula, but still not a, I admire, it was quite some time ago, but I admire Hans Zimmer. Hans was like the first one who took on one of, the big science fiction things and said, what I had thought many times is, okay, so explain this to me. These films are about the future and other worlds, other universes, things we can't imagine. And so why are all the scores orchestral?
Mm, mm.
You know, why isn't the music also from a different world and totally different and not what you're expecting? And I thought it was really brilliant how he managed to kind of do orchestral Hollywood scores, but completely different. You know, not a John Williams score, which is certainly, God bless John Williams, because he's a brilliant composer. But that doesn't mean that his scores are perfect for every scenario. And I really admire Hans for, you know, breaking the mold and kind of doing a somewhat obvious thing of having the music match the world that the film is in.
Yeah,
You know, I think one of the earliest things to do that maybe was Blade Runner, where the score was, you know, you felt like, oh, wow, I'm really in a different place here. And it really brought you into the film and that world, which I like that that invitational thing as opposed to you know, a more traditional Hollywood orchestral score kind of leaves you here in a purely observational thing. It's an entertainment thing. You're watching it. And I like films that bring you into that world where it's upsetting if someone walks in the room or drops a plate or something when you're jerked out of that world, that you don't realize how much you're immersed, not just in the story, but in this world. And you know, examples, I mean, even going back to To Kill a Mockingbird, just an incredible film that you're in Macon, Georgia. You know, it's you watch the film and you're there, and other films can be completely entertaining, but you're out here in your seat watching, being entertained, and that's fine. But I like the ones that, and I like doing music that brings you, that makes you part of that, that you're more than just one of the many people watching. And I guess I brought that to themes as well. I wanted you to feel the character of this person. I want you to feel the toughness of Steve Austin, that he's a machine that's coming for you and he will not stop. I mean, it doesn't matter. You can put, you know, a Mack truck in his way. He's not stopping. And that The Rock is this big Hollywood presence that's just going to keep humiliating you and having fun doing it. Just everything's a hoot. And it's like, I want people to feel like he's the leader of the pack and you're standing with him and enjoying the way he just shreds these opponents, both mentally and physically. I loved his thing. One of my favorite things ever was his, you know, what do you think about this, Tom? And you say the first word, it doesn't matter what you think about this, Tom. You know, how many times have we been in situations with people where essentially that's what we'd like to say to them? It's like, you know, it really doesn't matter what you think.
Well, I mean, what an amazing performer he was, and it was so obvious to me that he could go and become this huge a huge actor, and he was so brilliant and funny and all those things. But interesting about what you're saying is it seems to me that the through line in a way of your desire to kind of work on these smaller sort of intimate films, which actually makes me think of your film Legendary, and the sort of work you're talking about with the themes, is that it's about character, it's being character driven, right? That seems to me
Absolutely.
that's your interest, is this idea of, what I loved about Legendary is it's like, like you said, it's in Oklahoma, and it's this sort of small, there's only a few locations, a few characters, it's not this kind of bombastic thing. It's more like kind of drawing you into the characters. And I watched it and thought that's just the sort of film that I would really enjoy working on, I think, rather than these kind of massive sort of superhero things. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bunch of things that would sound like criticism out of context. It's a small story about small people in a small town. But there's incredible power in that ultimately that's everybody's story. We're all small people. It's just that some people think they're really big.
Yeah. And the high school wrestling match suddenly means so much, right? It's like a sort of small thing, but actually the emotion is it's such an interesting, the kind of the sort of beauty in the mundane, almost, which I think is and I think that's
it's a shared humanity quality to them that I think that is also can be a very positive healing thing. When people feel, I'm sort of like, I'm not that far gone. I mean, I'm no different than these people, and their thing worked out okay. And maybe my thing can work out okay too.
Oh, that's just bang on. I totally agree. Thinking about time, I have a couple more questions I want to ask you.
No, go. I'm fine.
A couple more. So I know that there are issues with things like publishing and rights and all this kind of stuff. But have you ever considered the idea of putting on a concert of your most famous works? Because it seems
I have, Tom, but it's just I'm so terrified of performance. I really am. I think it'd be really fun. It's a selfish fun, I think, because I'd love to hear it. Because I've done so little live work. What I've been thinking about recently has been because I would simply enjoy doing it, is doing, I don't know if you call them updated recordings, but new recordings of some of my favorite themes, either depending on how things worked out with them while at WWE, either more in the direction of how I wrote them. Because a lot of times I would, like you mentioned earlier about the Undertaker theme, I wrote as a simple, gentle, almost a child's theme. And that certainly is not going to work, in a wrestling capacity. But so some that I want to go back to let people hear how I originally wrote them, and some just that looking back the way they were produced at the time for whatever reasons is ways that I would have preferred to produce them and play them. But it's I have to commit the time and also commit that I'm going to finish them and release them and stop working on them.
Yeah, well, and also like they exist in, they're still being performed in their original context too. So I was thinking about saying to you, well, what if you did a sort of, a show, sort of orchestral show that, had the Undertaker and Goldust themes and Mankind and things. And I thought, well, there is that, but then there's also those things are still being played at Wrestlemania too, right? So
Yeah,
they sort of still have a life. And but I think, given
which is amazing, by the way.
all the video game music concerts that are being, if somebody puts on a concert of music from the Zelda video games, the ticket sales, I mean, everybody wants to go. So it just seemed to me that, like, an evening of the classic WWE music, I think, would be such a tremendous performance. So anyway,
It's an interesting thing. I'll think about it, or you have ideas about how that could unfold, certainly send them over, because I have no experience in the realm of, except for being in high school bands. I have no experience in the performance category
gotcha,
of the music industry.
Well, yeah, that definitely gives me something to think about. Amazing. That's very cool. But as you said as well, like, there's the rights and all that stuff is a whole thing as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's very strange that there isn't something in the copyright code where the composer can always do whatever they want. I mean, not give rights to put it in a film or something, but in terms of doing a new recording or playing it in a concert, that, I mean, you're the composer. Yes, you get to do that.
Right.
It's a very strange thing to me that, and most of the time it's not that big a deal. You can go on to Harry Fox and get a license, but even that you have to do that, it seems like, really? I have to get a license to play my own music.
Right. It is an odd.
It's like, can't we get down to, common sense 0 level, much less 101?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this has been absolutely amazing, and I've got about an eighth through the list of ideas that I had to think about. But so what I'll
give me two more.
I'll give you two more. So and I'll even ask them both up front. So the first one is there anything that you would like to promote as part of this, to tell people kind of things they can check out? And then the other part is, a lot of the listeners will be music students, people who aspire to be composers. So do you have any top tips for up and coming composers who are interested in writing music for wrestling, and also just top tips for people who want to be composers more broadly?
Definitely trust your instincts, that if you think it sounds good, it'll sound good to somebody else too. You will not be the only human on earth that thinks that sounds good. Don't try to sound like somebody else, particularly if you're a singer. It will be a gigantic liability, because you will, no matter how good your voice is, you will be perceived as, sounds like Taylor Swift, but not as good. Sounds like Billy Joel, but not as good. I've never, ever heard anyone say, sounds like Billy Joel, but like really good, because he'll forever be better at being Billy Joel than you will be. It's, genre, sounding like a genre, sounding like staying within the realm of what's popular, can be helpful in terms of trying to promote your music and get attention. But at some point, you're going to have to veer off and offer something that's different for people to stick with you. So don't, it's a delicate balance. You need to have your own something, just a little edge that somehow is different about what you're doing. At the same time, a disaster scenario is being different to be different, because then you'll be like, oh, well, yeah, the key, this is a pop song in E, but you know what? I'm just going to go to B flat because I've never done that before. You know, music just doesn't pan out well when you make those kind of decisions. If you're playing it and suddenly you want to make a chord change and B flat feels good, great, do it. But if you're doing it just to be different, it's going to feel exactly like that. It's like, oh, well, okay, it's different. Turn this off, you know. I think music is really a faith issue. You have to have faith, some sort of blind faith in yourself that you're doing something worth listening to. And you also have to love it in a purely selfish way. Like that I would do this whether they paid me or not. And a lot of times it's not going to work out because music is also a pretty mysterious, mercurial thing. You know, it's why you get these people who come along who seem to be extraordinarily good at certain things, and it seems to be very easy for them. Like they're not having to try. And I do believe in God's gifts. I feel that everyone has gifts for sure, everyone. I just don't feel that in a lot of cases people necessarily get the gifts that they would have chosen. And unfortunately, it's not your choice. So, you know, it's two directions. If you think you have a gift, go for it. But if you're going to go for it, boy, in the music industry, you've got to go for it. It can't be a half-assed effort. But also have the strength to at some point say, music will be a lifelong hobby for me that I will always love. And you know, sitting around playing with some friends and messing with a little home setup and recording some things. But you know, going professional is probably not my deal. You know, and find the gift that you have that does translate to a professional scenario. And also, maybe it's still in music, but just not being a composer. Maybe it's working at a label. Maybe it's working for a publisher. Maybe it's being an agent to bands. You know, there are a lot of different jobs in the music industry. Go back to school and become a music attorney. My God, we need those. There are quite a few out there, but a lot are horrible.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice. And I think, you know, part of the thing of this podcast is titled Become a Composer, but it's not titled Become a Professional Composer, right? And part of it's about learning to compose whatever context you compose in, you know, and I think that's you know, I think that's an important thing to remember as well, is that it's a lifelong passion that one carries, right? Writing music. So that's wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you so much again for doing this. It's just been it's been a thrill to meet you, man. I'm such a big fan of yours, and it's been a blast to sort of unearth some of the secrets of your great music. So thank you so much.
I don't know about secret. It's I don't know. It's very humbling and flattering to me that people are even interested, and that someone with your clear qualifications would welcome having me on. So I'm flattered and I'm very grateful. I'm happy to spend the time. It's been great.
Awesome, Jim. Thank you so much, man.
You're right.
All right.
Take care.
Cheers.
I'm sure we will speak again. Thank you, Tom.
You're very welcome.